I'm all right. Mike Yam, NFL Network, joining us right now on 95.7 The Game. Hey, Mike, how you doing, man?
Doing great. It's always appreciate the invite and good to be with you guys.
Absolutely, and thanks for coming on. Let me start with the 49ers, of course, and I always love to do this just to get, not that you're an outsider, but you're a national guy. What's your perspective on what's going on with the 49ers quarterback situation?
Oh, boy. One of the more interesting topics, I think, that the league has right now, because you look at a roster that is ready to win in this moment. And, hell, I mean, who knows what would have happened if Brock Purdy doesn't get hurt last year in the postseason. We could have been talking about this team as a Super Bowl squad. There's no doubt in my mind. So you look at a defense that is as dominant as any in the NFL, skill position players, at the wide receiver spot, and certainly coming out of that backfield that make most teams in the NFL, salivate and be jealous over that talent. And yet I still look at the quarterback spot. And if there's one team in the league, because of Kyle Shanahan, where quarterback is, and I'm trying to find the right way to say this, but maybe slightly less of a priority than other teams. And that's a good thing from a scheme standpoint and what's currently on that roster. Like, they can get away with winning without maybe having the definite answer as who's the week one starter.
Mike, are you like myself? There's just a part of me, that knows Brock Purdy hit the scene and shocked everybody, but I want to see what Trey Lance can do.
No doubt.
Is there any part of Mike Yam that feels that way too?
There's no question. I think when you give up as much draft capital and you think about why the Niners, and I actually had San Francisco for that draft. I was covering them for NFL Network. And I do think back to the conversations that I was having with people ahead of the draft about the potential of Trey Lance, and then heard John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan talk about why they went in that direction. I'm 100% with you. Why wouldn't you want to see what this guy is capable of doing? And unfortunately, hasn't necessarily been able to stay healthy. But what he did at college and knowing the fit and what he could potentially do just with his legs alone. I mean, I've been at some of those practices where, you watched when it was Jimmy, throwing, you'd be like, oh, okay, cool. And like the accuracy was there and he was making the right decisions. And then all of a sudden Trey gets out onto the football field and it's like lasers out there. And you're like, my Lord, I can't wait to see this dude, in a real game. So I'm with you 100%, but at the same time, because the roster is what it is right now, and John Lynch had said this, he goes, hey, when we moved up, when you pick third overall, most teams that are picking third overall aren't ready to win right now. And that's really what's unique about this situation. The Niners roster is, and if you got a guy in Brock Purdy who clearly can win you some football games, it's almost hard to say, all right, let's go and see what Trey can do for us. Like, there are other teams in the league that could mess around like that, and I don't know if the Niners are one of those teams.
Mike Yam joining us from the NFL Network. You're listening to 95.7 The Game. 10 minutes from now, we're going to be giving away those Seinfeld tickets, so don't go anywhere. Seinfeld might come into the Chase Center. How about that?
Go.
Yeah.
Sign me up for that.
Yes, absolutely. Let me ask you a little bit about the 49ers, their payroll, because it looks like we're coming up against, in the near future, that the 49ers may have a decision to make on Brandon Aiyuk, and Deebo Samuel. Can they afford to keep them both in the kind of post-Christian McCaffrey era?
A great question. And then you start to say to yourself, who's more needed? And I think, you go back a couple seasons ago when Brandon's a rookie, you go, oh, okay, cool. Like, here we go. And as I think it's fair to characterize his game as a little bit of inconsistencies until last year, watching him consistently perform. I think it sort of squashes some of those down moments that he had, a couple seasons ago. But, Deebo is as dynamic a player as there is in the NFL. In fact, he's on the short list. If you said to me, who's your favorite guy to watch, Deebo's name is there because of all the things that he can go and do. But you're right. Christian is dynamic, and there's a real investment in him, and rightfully so because of what he's capable of doing. I think the short answer is probably not being able to keep both. And I think there's some other teams right now that are going through similar situations. Cincinnati certainly comes to mind. Minnesota's had to make some tough calls with their offense. I mean, Adam Thielen not being there, they're trying to clear space so that they can afford to keep Justin Jefferson in the mix. Dalvin Cook is now available because, once again, you got to make sure that that you can keep your guys and within the structure of the salary cap. So I think the short answer is probably not, but the good news is, if they're able to figure out this quarterback situation, it might not matter.
Right.
Like, let's win right now with this roster and see how far they can go.
Good stuff, Mike. I can remember a couple years ago, Mike, this Niner offense was Deebo dependent. I mean, he was fantastic in the playoffs, Dallas, Green Bay, the Rams. But now all of a sudden, the quarterbacks, Purdy was getting the ball to Kittle, Aiyuk, I'm high on him. And now you got McCaffrey. What did you make of Deebo's comments about what he put on film last year?
I saw those comments. We played them on NFL Total Access the other day, and I just smiled because I'm sitting there going, "Man, if I was terrible like that, I'd be a real happy guy."
Right.
I'll tell you. I mean, he's so damn dynamic, and yet I was working with Michael Robinson on that Total Access, and I asked him that same question. I'm like, "Hey, man, like, what do you make of some of that stuff?" And he said, "Hey, it's exactly what you want to see some of your best players say publicly, and know that they are trying to do everything that they can to get better." And, I think back, and not to make this an NBA conversation, but I remember years ago I worked with Kenny Smith, and we were doing a radio show together, and we were talking about the off season. And he said, Mike, when I was a player, and at that time he's playing, he was referencing his time with the Rockets. He said, when I was young, it was all about, just sort of like, just kind of getting better. I didn't necessarily take it as seriously. And he's like, as the years go on and the more you're around veteran guys, it's what's the move that I can learn in this off season that will make me that much more harder to guard that upcoming season? What are those little things in the off season that I'm going to work on? And I think, now in a day and age of social media, we see all these players working out and trying to do that. And, people referencing what Kobe was able to do and trying to work on his game, and working with Olajuwon, trying to work on post moves. And, you see that stuff now. And I think that influence is starting to shape the current crop of athlete in a variety of sports. So I actually applaud Deebo for saying what he said. And it is kind of cool to see. But I think the reality is, we know, hey, on the short list of guys in the NFL that you want on your side, even in a terrible year, according to Deebo, he's still the dude that you want on your team.
Mike Yam joining us on 95.7 The Game. He works for the NFL Network. Any chance Seattle's better than the Niners this year?
Yeah, I absolutely think that's possible. Another year for Geno. This roster, the last 2 years, I think they crushed it in the draft this year. I think they crushed it last year in the draft. I think Pete Carroll's got probably a coy smile on his face, thinking to himself, like, yeah, we legitimately have a chance. I think they were able to fill some holes here. And to your point, Matt, the fact that we're even asking that question, I think automatically means the answer is yes. Right. And I think part of it has to do, and I know I sort of said that, the Niners are the one team in the NFL that I can think of off the top of my head where even if you don't totally know who the week one starter is, you still feel good about their chances. There's less questions, I think, around that Seattle team because of these last two drafts. And if I wouldn't be surprised if Seattle won that division, just based off of what we have on paper, which is still just on paper.
Wow, Mike, because, I like Seattle. I was telling my partner they got pieces, but they do got an inability to stop the run. Some say they fixed and rectified that in the draft, but that's high praise. I was going to ask you about the former Super Bowl champions in that division, the Rams. A lot of people have left them for dead. What do you expect from the Rams?
Man, I hope they're healthy. It was sad to see the amount of attrition that they had to their roster. A revolving door, it felt like, at every single layer. I hated the fact that Jalen Ramsey got shipped out of town because I think it marks a new era of Rams football. But if Matthew Stafford's healthy and he's out there the entire season, Cooper Kupp is able to stay out there the entire season, Aaron Donald's able to stay out there, it's hard for me not to envision more wins than they had a season ago. But I think it's going to require Sean McVay to be as creative as we've seen him in his coaching career thus far. There's pieces that are here, but that's not a Super Bowl team right now based off of some of the losses that they've had in this offseason. And, we have this conversation a lot. Like, they went all in on free agency to go and try to get a title. And there's some other teams that are probably thinking in those terms, and they were able to do it. But here's the offshoot of it. Like, it's not necessarily the most sustainable thing. And other teams, I'll throw Cincinnati out there for an example. Like, Cincinnati hasn't won a Super Bowl, but, like, right now they're set up for consistent success for years to come because they built through the draft. They made some shrewd moves in free agency. And yet here we are, like the main building blocks are still in place for them to go and thrive. And right now, from a Rams perspective, they have some building blocks. But when you have that many guys that you're relying on to play at an elite level, like they did a couple of years ago when they won the Super Bowl, and those three dudes in Stafford and Kupp and Donald all are coming off a season where they were banged up and hurt, to me, that's a little bit of a red flag.
Mike, thank you so much for joining us as always. Really appreciate it. And football can't get here soon enough.
Man.
Yeah, you're not lying, guys. Matt, always good to hear your voice, man. I hope you're doing well, and certainly missed the time that I had to get to work with you for a short period of time there.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. Thank you, Mike. Appreciate the kind words.
Take care, guys.
All right, man.